What's going on, everybody? Happy Friday. Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You know my guest. He's the one and only Mike Wahle. You can find him on Twitter or X at Mike Wahle68. Mike, it's great to have you back. Happy holidays. How have you been?
Andy, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, as always.
Yeah, it's always fun having you. A lot to discuss this week. Unfortunately, not a ton in the positive category, although there certainly was some things on offense to take away from this one. But I feel like I'm playing the hits this week, talking to everyone. It's impossible not to start on the defensive side of the ball. Let me just start by simply kind of asking you this. Coaching issue, scheme issue, execution/player issue, or all of the above?
Yeah, that's a yes, so certainly. and everyone's got their opinion as far. I think, the fun thing about being a fan when you're outside of the organization or you don't know, you don't know how the sausage is made. Is that you can go largely on emotion. So there's a lot of emotional, well, this isn't happening, I don't like it, so I can get angry. But if you just this is an NFL organization. I mean, the locker room plus the coaching staff plus the personnel staff, just that alone, that is a living organism. And so all these different interactions mean something, and the way they interact with one another, and the way that they hold each other accountable, all of those things matter. In a way that we don't necessarily, we just kind of look at the outcome and go, well, it's not working or it's not. But the point here is, if you don't have any personal responsibility as a professional athlete to know the basic assignments that you're required to know on day one, that you understand your run fits, that you understand your checks and calls, that you understand how to tackle, or you're an expert at the basics of your positional requirements, tackling, coming, shedding blocks, etc. If you're not good at that stuff, it's on you. It's not on the coach. For a coach's responsibility now, and there's different levels of this, but the coach's responsibility is to help you get to a point where you can be your best in some form or fashion. But the onus ultimately is on you, the athlete. And so if there's a situation where you can't tackle, or you don't know how to shed a block, or you're not comfortable enough in what you're doing to have the proper run fit, or you're not comfortable enough in what you're doing to make the call or the check, or you're not identifying something on film, and you're not getting help from the coach, that doesn't excuse you from not being able to do it. Now, the flip side of that, Andy, is if you're a coach and you have a player, and I've been around guys like this that can, let's say they can ingest 5 pieces of information and do it at a high level, and the coach is giving them 25 pieces of information. Well, that's on the coach. You got to understand your personnel, understand what you're doing. The difference here is what the disconnect where it often occurs is, how many guys are actually putting in the maximum amount of Ray Lewis tape time in order to get ready to execute whatever's being asked of them? How much practice, prep, film session with Amon Green we used to talk on our show last year. We would get together on Fridays, and the running backs and the tight ends, and everybody would watch blitz pickup with us. The quarterback would run the drill, because you have to know what everybody's going to be doing. It doesn't matter if I know it. If you don't know it, we're not communicating. Or if we're using different language to talk about the same thing. So, there's blame to go around. But, ultimately, the thing that's interesting with the Packers is, and we saw this with Mike Tomlin today, it's probably a separate discussion. But the interesting about the Packers is they don't have an owner. So there's no Jerry Jones telling you have to play a guy who's not prepared. So if there's guys on the roster that aren't prepared to play or aren't playing at the level they should, and they're preparing, if I was a coach, I'd rather lose with the lesser athlete that's putting his heart and soul into it than losing with the better athlete that's not working hard to get to where they need to be. And I'm not saying that's the situation in Green Bay, but given what you're seeing on tape every week, something's got to give. And that explanation leads me to think there's probably a little bit of that going on, we're playing the talent.
So you mentioned there's a lot that goes into this and how the sausage is made, and it's a living organism. Let me ask you this. It's on the player to understand their basic assignments, how to tackle, all those sort of things. I'm 1,000,000% in agreement with you. How much of that is on the front office to get the right players in the first place that have that mentality, that want to go the extra mile, that want to do the tape study, that care about the game, and that in today's day and age, at least have that baseline of tackling and basics down when they kind of get to the NFL, and are, again, going to continue to work on it? Is that a piece of this as well? Or is that just too much to expect when you're drafting a bunch of college players and expecting them to come in and start from scratch, basically?
Yeah. Great question, Andy. So I'll just give you an example. So if somebody asks me to do a write-up on a college player as an eval, Like I have a way that I go through that. It's a very process best way. So I don't really care if you got the play right or not, if you won or you lost. I'm going to tell that person who wants the information how they're going about their business, like what the process looks like and where they can improve. Because that's all that really matters to me.
Yep.
When I've talked to personnel guys in different places, they can fall in love with the measurables. They can fall in love with like an aggressive person. Like I love how aggressive this guy is on tape, even though he doesn't do anything right. They can fall in love with all these different characteristics that usually has something to do with like the physical or maybe the temperament. And what we fall into the problem of is like that doesn't address what is actually happening behind the scenes. Like the reason that I'm always so enamored with a person being the best at the basics, the person having technical mastery, is because that is a gateway into or an insight into that person's professionalism. That's an insight into that person's resiliency. That's an insight into how that person takes information and processes it. Like you can't just wake up and be really good at, coming in and out of breaks, blocking or tackling, quarterback footwork. All of that stuff takes a lot of effort and people don't spend a lot of time on it. So if I can find a guy that is really good at that, like I already know a lot of those intangible things that I can't measure on the field, I'm already going to like. And I don't think that I don't know about necessarily about the Green Bay Packers, but I know that in other organizations I've been around, they don't consider that at all. They consider like what the 40 time is, what the vertical jump is. Wow, he jumps off tape because he's a better athlete than everybody else at the college level. Those things don't necessarily matter to somebody like me, but I could see how you could kind of see how like at some level, it's very easy to fall into this traditional trap of we've been doing it the same way for 30, 40 years. We're just going to continue to do it that way.
It's funny because it's always talked about of like, well, you can't teach the 4.340 speed. Like you can teach them how to play football, but I also think it doesn't get talked about enough of like how you can't teach that mentality of wanting to be the best, of mastering your skill set, of doing those sort of things. And to me, that matters. And I do think some of the best teams in the league look for a lot of those intangible qualities. And of course, when we talk about making the secrets, there's no perfect formula. If there was, everyone would be doing the exact same thing. If you end up with a bunch of guys that have amazing intangibles, but everyone's running a 4.840, you're probably not going to end up doing all that well either. You've got to have a mix of everything. But I do think what you're saying is hugely underrated. And I don't think it gets enough credit for just the time, effort, energy, the intangibles, all those sort of things that go into it and making just kind of everything work and tick. And it felt like for a while, Green Bay had some players like that. On defense, I don't see a lot of that right now. And I think, again, I've been talking all week. I don't think it's just one thing. And that's why I wanted to start with that question at the beginning for you. I don't think this is a copy and paste, cut out Joe Barry, paste in a new defensive coordinator and job's done. You're good to go. I think there's going to have to be a lot of things looked at on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah. So there's two things I just wanted to hit because you brought it up. So the bandwidth and talent at the pro level is really small. Everyone wants to think it's really big. It's not. It's really small. And so there's a couple outliers, a couple guys that run like a 4.2, 4.3, whatever. But the thing is like, and coaches don't know this. You can teach speed. Your kid's going to a speed camp next week. We just talked about it. My kid does too, because you can teach speed. Now you can't teach 4.3 speed necessarily, but I can, you can drop it down to a very competitive level. You can teach change of direction. You can teach them you can help make them more pliable. You can help make them more stronger, more powerful, more athletic. You can do all that stuff. It was always, the thought process was 30, 40 years ago that you couldn't do it, but you can. And unfortunately, a lot of this stuff doesn't really caught up with like who's in charge of the people who are playing on game day. And then the other thing that I think is relevant is like, while the answer might not be as easy as insert, the Giants D coordinator for Joe Barry, right? I don't think it doesn't work like that for me either, because it starts with where Matt LaFleur, because he's the head coach and there's no owner here, right? And Goody's he's not a like X's and O's guy. So it's like how Matt LaFleur takes the time in the offseason to address how he is going to set expectations, how he's going to transparently communicate with his staff, how those expectations are going to flow through to the players, what structure he's going to set up his meetings, practice schedules, so they can, all the details have time to be kind of teased out. Like all of that stuff matters. And it's not necessarily for each team a cut and paste. We'll just fix this problem, right? Or we'll just we'll do what the Steelers are doing because the Steelers have always been good, or we'll just do what the Patriots are doing because Belichick was always so smart. Like it doesn't work that way. You have to bring your own personal style to it. But it doesn't matter who you put at the DC spot. Having said that, if you bring in, if you were to get rid of a guy like Joe Barry right now, what you do get to do is you get to test the rest of your staff. It gives two things. It really gives a heads up to the defensive players, like, you did this. A man just lost his job because you're not doing yours. Because that's really how they feel. They might not say it, but that's how they feel. And then the second thing is, like, you have all these other people on your staff. If you have a crackerjack staff, maybe there's somebody on there that can show up and show out. And maybe you get a little bit head start on thinking about what you want to do from a philosophical standpoint next year. But I'm not saying that's the answer, but I do see some positives from changing it even at this late in the season.
I agree with that. And I was a little bit surprised that they didn't, if nothing else, to maybe give them a spark on defense these last 3 games when they're still competing for the playoffs. But clearly that was not the direction that they decided to go in. I will be interested to see if things, for some reason, go very poorly against this Carolina offense. Then what happens? Do you fire the guy on Christmas? I don't know. It just gets messy after this, but we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully they just play well against Carolina and can go on a streak after that. All right, sticking on the defensive side of the ball, I wanted to start with off-ball linebacker. We obviously had Devondre's comments this week. It was a tough day for Quay Walker and Devondre Campbell. Both players have been beat up. They've been on the injury report. They've been in and out of games. But I think we've seen over the past, really going back to last season and this season, I think we've seen a little bit of a trend from both of these players. But just wanted your take on the off-ball linebackers, Campbell's comments, and where these, kind of 2 players are trending.
As far as performance goes, we've talked about this ad nauseum, but like from my standpoint and what could be happening versus what is happening. There's communication issues that were, I think, blatant during the game. And, those guys are the quarterbacks of your defense. That's a very, very critical position in this defense. And you have to be super confident. You have to be super engaged, and you have to be aggressive, and you have to be a great communicator. And so there's that position requires a lot. And I don't know that, injuries or not, I don't know that they've performed at a level that is required of them their entire season. In regards to Devondre's comments, again, you just have to assume he's referencing the fact that he's playing injured. I played injured, and what Devondre, if we're taking that tack and we're saying that he's frustrated because he's injured and he's being judged on a scale that's not necessarily fair to him right now because he thinks he's doing everybody a favor. I've been there, man. And it's tough because what you want is you just want somebody to stand up and say, like, this guy is dying for us every week and he's hurt and he's not who he wants to be, but he's out there playing for our team. And the fact that he had to go to this length to say that, or for anybody to stand up for him at this point in the season is really, I think it's toxic. Like, I think it's terrible that he had to say it, or that he felt like, I think it's bad that he said it. I think it's bad that he felt like he had to say it because nobody else was saying it for him. Yeah. It really is bothersome. Now, when he puts it out there and then the next day he says, "Oh, I'm not going to talk about it," it's like, well, shoot, man, why did you bring it up then? like I don't understand that thought process. Like, I know you have, it's everyone's real smart on this thing, but all of a sudden you got to talk face to face, and like life changes a little bit. And I don't like that approach. Like, stand behind what you said, man. If you're upset by it, just it's fair to say, like, you're a respected person in the locker room. If you feel like I've been playing hurt and I'm doing my best, like, hey, media, I'm playing hurt. I'm doing my best. Like, I know it's not what you guys want. I know it's not what I want. But God damn it, I'm going to be out here. I'm going to bleed for this team because that's my job. And I think people respect you when you say stuff like that, but you can't put it on here and then say you're not going to talk about it the rest of the day.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I think if you would have said exactly what you just said, I think he gains a higher level of respect from everyone, honestly. I want to ask you about that human element and just like the decision-making process. You've mentioned you've played hurt, you've played injured. What goes into that when you're thinking, all right, I'm clearly not 100% here. I need to go out and help my team. Obviously, different injuries are, some you just literally can't play through, some you can. Like, how do you, like, what goes into all of that decision in deciding to play in a given week when you're not yourself?
Well, it depends where you're at in your career, I suppose. I mean, now, I don't know. Like, I didn't get hurt. I got hurt my 8th year. I was an all-pro. And it was like, man, you pay me a lot of money to do the job. This is the job I want to do my whole life. You're not going to get me off the field unless I can't, and I literally can't perform. Or if you can find somebody to replace me that's going to do a better job than I could. at the time, for me, that wasn't the case. And I remember I was in so much, and if I told you the amount of pain medication I was taking just to get through the day, I wasn't sleeping at night. I was the worst version of myself.
Yeah.
And at one point I went to John Fox and just said, look, man, Foxy, if you've got anybody else to do the job, like, I am dying. I'm not playing well. I'm playing with one arm. I can barely tolerate walking around. I'm in so much pain. And they're like, yeah, we had the discussion, man. There's nobody better than you doing the job one-handed. And I was like, well, I guess because the team, the hard part is the coaches have a shorter term contract than you do. I mean, their leash is shorter, right? So they want you to play because you're the player to play. And for me, it took literally my shoulder popped out of socket during warmups about to play the Pittsburgh Steelers when I hit Chris Jenkins. My shoulder dropped to the floor. And I was like, all right, I need to get another MRI. And they figured out what was wrong with me. And I went on an IR. But the point is, as a player, and the brand, all the brand awareness and all this stuff, and they understand the business a little bit better now. So I think that's part of it too. But as a player, Devondre Campbell just signed a big contract because he played so well 2 years ago. He was injured last year. And a guy like that's thinking, I'm sure, I can't get inside his head, but he's like, I got a job to do. I want to do it the best I can. And at some point you got to go, am I hurting my brand by being out there? And does that matter to me? And for some guys that matters, for lunch pail guys like me, it don't really matter that much. My brand is what it is. But for some guys, that's going to make a difference. And I think for this generation of athlete, I think the thing that probably sticks with them most is not the pain tolerance or not even the ability, but it's like, how much is this going to affect how people view me, and can I deal with that? And then the other part is what Devondre said, like, is somebody going to come out and say and have my back that I'm busting my ass for this group, or am I just going to have to be kind of critiqued with the unsilent majority?
As a player, have we reached the point that you're just screwed either way? If you're Jair Alexander and you've got a shoulder injury and you're not playing, everyone's frustrated with you. David Bakhtiari's got numerous, people commenting on how, they're pissed that he's not playing over the course of the past couple seasons. You don't play, people hate you. You do play and you're not yourself. You've tried to play through the injury. You've got everything out. You don't play quite as well because of it. Everyone's pissed at you as well. Is it just a no-win situation? And is there a way? I know we're in the world of fantasy football and Madden, and nobody's a real person, but is it just gone? Is it just the way it's going to be?
Well, I think the thing you have to remember is that David Bakhtiari doesn't care what anybody thinks. He doesn't care what a fan thinks.
Yeah.
I'm sure David Bakhtiari, I don't know him, but I'm sure he likes to have people like him. But if somebody's going, this and this and this, and he's hurt, like, he doesn't care. You think he cares about? You think he cares about what those guys think? He doesn't care at all, and none of the guys do. When I say that, when I make the comment that, like, Devondre wants somebody to stand up and say something for him, like, it's not because Rob Domofsky's saying something in the paper. He doesn't care about Rob Domofsky. He doesn't care about Rob or anybody. I'm pick a name. Yep. He could care less about those guys. What he cares about is the people in the building are acknowledging that he's sacrificing. That's all you want. You just, you have a group that you respect and that you actually care about what they think about you. It's like if Andy, I always tell it to the people like this. If I told you to go in front of your kids' like preschool class and tell a story, you're not going to be nervous at all, are you? Because they're 4-year-olds. You don't care. You know what I mean? I mean, in other words, they're not your peer group, right? Yep. But if I put you in front of a group of people that you really respect and you got to give a big speech, like, you're going to be sweating a little bit before, because you care about what they think.
Yep.
And in the NFL, it's the people that they really care about what they think are already in the building. And so they just wanted that these guys just want that acknowledgement from them. If they have it from them, they're going to be comfortable with everything else.
It's funny because if some people ask me from time to time of like, well, like, what if like a player's upset because you were critical of them or you gave them a bad grade? I'm like, the last thing that they should ever be concerned about is like what I say or what grade I give them. Like, why would you ever care? You've got your own people in your own building that you can worry about that stuff. Like, if players should not care whatsoever about what any of us are probably really saying.
The only thing I'd say about that is, like, PFF is an example of like a job a group that, because of Chris Collinsworth, has really become popular, and teams all use it. And because they use it for like first and second down analytics and whatnot, they'll also try to some contract guys will say, well, PFS said he was only a 78 this year. And it's like, the fact that that is allowed is like the fact, if a GM came to me as an agent and said that, I would literally hang up, I would laugh, hang up the phone, and never call him back. Just go to a different team.
Yeah.
Because it's so ignorant. But that does happen now. And these, it's like, you get paid more if you're a Pro Bowler. Well, how do you get, what are the three elements of getting Pro Bowl votes? Well, only one of them is the one that matters. Like, the only one that really matters is whether or not, your peers think you're any good or not. Now, if the media thinks you're good, that's great. If the fans like your Twitter account, they think you're good, that's okay too. But it really doesn't matter. But it does affect the way you get paid.
Yep.
So some of this stuff is like, there's obviously interaction here between media, fans, and players that is an important part of football. And unfortunately, sometimes those lines get a little blurry, I think.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Let's jump to the offensive side of the ball. There were a couple positive takeaways. I know you tweeted out about Tucker Kraft's blocking. I wanted to ask you, because it sounds like a part of this is that they're putting him in good positions to succeed as a blocker. What have you seen out of Tucker Kraft?
Yeah, Tucker's obviously continuing to get better, more comfortable with the playbook. My comment was just that they're not putting him in a situation, they're not trying to line him up against their stand-up outside linebacker, defensive end, and just trying to one-on-one block, because he's really not equipped to do that yet at a high level.
Yep.
And so what they're doing is that, they still do a little bit of the split flow stuff, and they'll run a lead where, he's running a slip block with another tight end or a tackle, or they'll get him on the second level against a linebacker, or like a middle linebacker, or an off the ball linebacker who's a little bit kind of physically more equal to. And so they're putting in positions. My whole point is, like, Matt LaFleur's done such a good job of installing his playbook and then going, all right, well, let's see what these guys are really good at. And now let's just have them do more of that. So we're not, going back during the film session going, why are we asking Tucker Kraft to block Aiden Hutchinson? That doesn't make any sense. Let's stop doing, or Max Crosby. Like, let's stop doing that. And let's have him go on the off-the-ball linebacker, where we can actually do a pretty good job. Everybody's happy with the work that he's doing. He builds a lot of confidence, and now he grows as a player.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things of the evolution of the offense this season. Is it really feels like everyone has a specific role within the offense, or at least, to your point, Matt's using them in the positions that you really utilizes their skill sets best. And Matt, I really wish Musgrave and Watson didn't get hurt, and Jones didn't get hurt, and obviously Bakhtiari didn't get hurt, because I think they have a lot of the right skill positions doing the right things. And you were really starting to see this offense click. And I think some of those injuries slowed things down more than a little bit, but it's also allowed the opportunity for guys like Tucker Kraft to get more playing time, and also, no pun intended, hone their craft as well. And it's been a positive experience, I think, for some of those younger guys who've gotten a little bit more playing time, like Tucker. Another player I wanted to ask you about on offense was Rasheed Walker. A lot of positives bandied about this week about Rasheed, but I trust your offensive line evaluation more than just about anyone's. Not just about anyone's, more than anyone's. Your thoughts on Rasheed and how he's been playing this past month?
Well, since they started splitting time, it kind of always goes back to the same thing for me. Like, I think he's gotten better, maybe not linearly, but pretty much week in and week out since the beginning of the season. He won the job in training camp over Yash. And then there's some up and downs versus some, good players. And listen, it's not like, why did he win the job in training camp? My opinion. Well, he's a stronger athlete. He's got, I just like his footwork better. And I think his footwork translates better, particularly in the run game than Yash's did. I mean, that's it. Nothing's changed. He's continuing to become the more you play, the more reps you get, the better you become. And that's what you see with Rasheed Walker. Now, does that mean that Rasheed Walker is your 5-year answer at left tackle? That's probably a discussion to be had about that. But for this season, you have to be. Look, when you look at this offensive line, you have to sit here and go, realistically, you've got Jenkins and you've got Zach Tom, and they're both young relatively, and they're both, Zach Tom is particularly is arguably one of the better team players on your entire offensive team right now.
Yep.
And he's only going to get better, and he could become an elite level. He's athletic enough, and his ceiling's high enough athletically that you go, he could really be an elite level tackle in this league. And Jenkins, if he becomes a little bit maybe more intrigued with finishing through the whistle, he could become an elite level left guard as well. So those are your right now kind of your cornerstones of your team. And then for me, it's you starting to ask these questions. Like, if you want to really make a difference on this offense, it's probably going to be along the offensive line. And now it's like, do you want to get a Rasheed Walker, or really it's not the right guard? It's going to be, do you want to get a Rasheed Walker? Or do you want to have somebody, or do you want to keep him, or do you want to keep Josh Myers? And I think one of those guys in the offseason maybe is somebody you look for. I mean, if there's a big time trade opportunity, or if there's just a can't miss guy in the first round, it's just something you might look at, unless you feel like Josh has taken enough strides to move forward, and I feel comfortable about how he leads the room in the meeting room, how he is in practice, how his practice habits are, how he communicates, and then the same with Rasheed at whatever form or facet you think is appropriate for his position. So I think all these guys are evolving and continuing to build. If you're looking at this team to be really good at the skill position areas next year, like if you think Jordan Love's going to take a huge step, and you think all these wide receivers and tight ends are going to kind of be where you think they're going to be next year as far as pre-snap recognition, communication, execution, then you're like, the only thing that might hold us back now is the offensive line. And where can we really upgrade there? And what kind of difference can that make, in the next 3, 4, 5 years?
Yeah, what I've been talking about is I think if you could get like in the first or early second round, like somebody with tackle guard versatility, now you have competition everywhere, because if it's Rasheed, all right, now you just drafted a guy in the first or second round that can compete there. You can probably move Elton out if you need to, Zach Tom if you need to. You've got a lot of versatility there. At center, if all of a sudden you've got a player who can start on the outside and Josh Myers is your weak link, all right, you could theoretically move Elton inside. You could theoretically move Zach inside. It just gives you a lot of opportunity to actually get your best 5 guys on the field. And again, I'm not excited, or like I would not want to move Zach or Elton. I think you just kind of try to set it and forget it. But it does give you more optionality of trying to get your best 5 out on the field. And if you go through camp and it's Sean Ryan or Josh Myers or Rasheed Walker, that's the weak link. Now you've got some different options that can go in those specific spots.
Yeah. For me, I think that's, I don't disagree with the idea. I think for me, I really like to have guys that, you like to have guys that can play everywhere. There's no question about it. Like, so if you guard, but maybe that's like a first year thing. Like when they drafted Laramie into Miami, they put him at guard because Brandon Albert was there, but then it was like, everyone knew he was going to be our left tackle.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if I wouldn't move Jenkins. I mean, I've already tried the tackle experiment. I wouldn't move him. Zach Tom's going to be, if Zach Tom has the potential to be a Pro Bowl level right tackle, just leave him. And quite frankly, these days, when you look at when you look at high level tackles in the first round of the draft, or high level guards, there's very few of those guys now. Have you noticed this? That are like, oh yeah, well he can play either. It's like, no, the guys that they really value in the first round are like, we're tackles now, or we're guards now, but not necessarily both. Not that they couldn't be. Like Trevor Penny, the guy they picked up from the Saints a couple years ago, was like the Tommy Tough guy in all the film.
Yep. You
could kind of go like, yeah, you could probably play both, right? But for a lot of these, the Ohio State guy, the Tennessee guy, like, dude, he's a tackle, right? The kid that plays for the Bears.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm not down on anybody on this offensive line. I'll say that. I think that I think all the guys that aren't playing at the level that you want them to play at, I don't know what the physical limitations are versus like technically, like a lot of the footwork's still pretty, it's just not where you want it to be yet.
Yeah.
And even when you watch, oh gosh, who did we just play? Tampa. Like Tampa's offensive line isn't full of Tristan Wirfs is an absolute unit. The rest of those dudes are just average NFL athletes, but they actually are pretty good with their feet, and they do a good job of kind of what we just call sticking to. They stay square to the line of scrimmage, and they don't really get off. They don't get thrown around very often. Like guys don't detach from their blocks very often, and like that's just technique work. And so if you're not getting that at this level, then and the guys aren't performing, then it's like, well, you got to get them there. And then that goes back to the earlier conversation of like, okay, what is the way that they're going to get there?
Yeah, that'll be interesting to keep an eye on and see what they do, if they just bring in some competition or if they're more willing to roll with a couple of those guys. All right, before I get you out of here, it is officially the Mike Wahle Bowl this week, Packers versus Panthers. First of all, whose side are you on? And second of all, what are you watching for this week in this upcoming game?
I'm much more of a Packers fan than a Panthers fan. In fact, I would rank it Packers, Seahawks, Panthers. I got injuries in Carolina. Played through some really bad conversations with what we just kind of talked about.
Yeah.
So I'm not. I was thrilled when David Tepper bought the team. I was thrilled when David Tepper bought it. I thought it was a great change of ownership idea. But 7 years later, he's got $70 million on the books for coaches that he's fired already in the last 2 seasons.
Not great.
And the Matt Rule experiment, I think everybody knew was going to be a bad deal. And I'm sorry if you're a Nebraska guy, but I mean, I just, everybody who was there was like, come on, why are we drafting? Why are we bringing this guy in? And that didn't work. And then, Frank was such an interesting thing, right? Because he was so good with Carson early in Philly. And then he goes to Indy and Carson crumbles because they don't have a coach that can teach him footwork anymore. His footwork goes to hell and he can't throw the ball. And so he gets fired in Indy. And then instead of taking a year, instead of doing like the Mike McCarthy sabbatical, just taking a deep breath and like reflecting a little bit, he scoops up and gets hired by Tepper immediately. And it was a real head scratcher.
Yeah.
And Frank Reich seems like a really good guy, and he put together a good staff. And I think it was a tough situation down there with the owner. But then you get fired halfway through the season 2 years in a row. Like it's just nuts, and that can really dismantle an organization. So I think it'll be. I don't think they're very close to being good for a while. I think the only good thing about being with Panthers right now is that the NFC South's not very good either. As it pertains to this game, Andy, this is a good defense. They've got good players on defense, man. Derek Brown versus whoever our right guard is, you better buckle up, man, because that guy can play. Brian Burns and Zach Tom is going to be a match. I watch almost all the Carolina Panthers games, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if they move Brian over Rasheed for at least half the game. He usually plays on the left side of their defense. I wouldn't be shocked at all if they bring him over there. But I like Grossmata. I love Frankie Lavue. Frankie Lavue's a stud, dude. And the way that guy rushes the passer, like I've seen him just drop right guards on stutter blitzes. I've seen him make guys miss. He made the right guard 51 for the Saints miss last week for a sack. I like him running pass. Their secondary's got some experience now. They're just dealing with a very, very inept offense. And they've got great – James Campen's their O-line coach. He's a great coach. I mean, so much success in Green Bay, right? It's just they had Aiden Corbett was the right guard. He came over from L.A. Rams, and he's hurt. And Taylor Moton's still a great right tackle, one of the more underrated players in the league. Rashawn Gary and Taylor Moton matchup is going to be awesome. But Ike Ekwonu, we're talking about technique. Ike Ekwonu is one of the best athletes you will see just walking around. But he's very, very poor with kind of what we just call being grounded, like good relationship with the ground. And he has very, very erratic, inconsistent technique. And they've all kind of taken a step back because of some of these injuries and because of the fact that he hasn't taken a step forward. Frank brought in an offense that was a lot of shotgun drop back, shotgun RPO stuff. And Bryce Young doesn't do a good job of getting off his first read. He's not very good at it. When you look at CJ, when you look at Jordan Love, I mean, these young guys, the difference in the players isn't the arm. It's your ability to get from your first to second to your third read. And like CJ Stroud's showing everybody that it can be done at the quarterback level as a rookie or as a young player. And all these other guys are playing catch up. And so when you look at the Packers and Panthers on offense, like you see a lot of the same themes. They're really building now. Thomas Brown they're playing a lot more downhill. They want to use under center. They want to use pistol formation so they can cut the field in half with play action. They can have a more downhill running game for that offensive line and Chuba Hubbard to get rolling a little bit better. I think they've had some success the last couple of weeks. But really that under center and that pistol play action, that really cuts the field in half for Bryce Young. It helps him with the coverage, and it reduces the amount of decisions he has to make so he can play faster. But there's a lot going on there. I mean, they're averaging 14 points a game. They're just not very good. And what'll be interesting this week, Andy, is Preston and Rashawn versus those tackles. Again, I'm going to say it. Taylor Moton is one of the most underrated right tackles in the National Football League. He has been good since day one. He's been a leader there. He's a really, really good player. That matchup's going to be fun to watch between him and Rashawn Gary and then on the other side with Preston and Ickey, because this kid has been sacked 54 times and he feels pressure. Like he feels it, and when he feels it, he's gone, man. He's not like looking to step up and shuffle his feet and find number 3. He's trying to get the heck out of there. And whether he's running away, he's running to the line of scrimmage, like he's trying to leave the area. So it's that second and third rush or that effort that it's going to take to get him down. But he will feel pressure early. And for that reason, I'm really hoping, as for the Packers, this is kind of a get right game. Let's load up the box, stop Chuba, put their tight ends in positions where they got to play one-on-one versus our defensive ends and make blocks because they can't. Tommy Tremble and the group can't do it. And then, man, get after this kid, because they're going to isolate. They're going to go 3-by-1 or 4-by-1, and they're going to put Thielen on the other side. And if Thielen doesn't get free right now, his eyes going back here, man, he feels pressure fast. So it's like, Get him off the first read. You got to play up on Thielen. You cannot play 8 yards deep or 12 yards deep. You got to play up on him. Get him off his first read. Make him turn his head. Feel pressure. Rally to the quarterback.
Well, hopefully we're not talking about next week why they played 10 yards off of Adam Thielen in our breakdown next week. Frankie Luvu, really fun player, as you mentioned. I think he's a free agent in the offseason. That would be an interesting name if they decide to move.
Man. That guy's he's really good.
Love the physicality that he plays with. That would be a fun one if Green Bay decided to move off of Devondre Campbell and actually decided to spend some money, but we'll see if that's actually in the cards or not. Mike, phenomenal stuff as always. Love every Friday getting to chat with you. Tell everyone where they can find your work and anything else you want to plug.
Yeah, sorry if I went on. It's like we shoot this on Thursday. It's like Thursday rant day for me. I actually have a rant section in my show today. On my Block podcast is out. You can get it on Process to Perform channel on YouTube and wherever I get it. But I actually included a rant. I didn't realize I was doing it, but when I started clipping it up, like I actually did a rant session today, because it's some of the stuff you're reading here is just it's mind bending. But you can find me Mike Wahle 60 on Twitter, Process to Perform, Instagram. Andy, thanks for having me on, man. It's always fun.
Mike, anytime you want to have a rant session, just tell me to shut up. You can have the whole 37 minutes to go on any rant that you want to go on. I'm happy to let you have that platform. I'm sure everyone else would be happy with it as well. But if you want the rant session, go check out on my Block podcast. It is can't miss every single week. Of course, follow him at Mike Wahle 68. You can find me at Andy Herman NFL. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.